Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. From Super Sunday to Stupor Monday, as many fans are sad to see football go, but not this guy. Wait till you get a load of what I have to get off my chest regarding that and plenty more when it comes to the sports world, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And I'm just going to cut right to it, people. I know I'm going to be in the minority for speaking what it is over the course of these next 5 minutes as I try to keep this as tidy as possible. But I'm going to be on an island all by myself when it's all said and done, because what I may say or what I'm going to say is going to be maybe even borderline controversial. But this is what happens when you're an independent podcaster who's been doing this for almost 7 years. And for what we've witnessed over the last, we'll say, 23, 24 weeks in the NFL, last night's game was exactly what the Shield deserved. And as I try to encapsulate this 2024 NFL season pretty much in these next 3-4 minutes, you could break it down any which way possible. And I don't care if you're a guy that is in bed with the NFL, in deep admiration and love for the NFL, and I am. Listen, I've been watching this sport going back to the mid-'70s. And I cannot divorce myself from all that has transpired here going back to 1976. But I have to call it like I see it. This is not some clickbait comments that I'm about to spew. This is not an opinion that's going to be so off the wall. I'm sure, again, I'm going to be on the island by myself, but there is a small minority that probably feels exactly how I feel when I witnessed that just absolute debacle last night in New Orleans. And for those who didn't watch the live stream last night, you could go to my YouTube channel at JReels and you could get every nook and cranny about the game, about the commercials, about the broadcasting, about the halftime show. So please, I implore you to go check that out after you listen to this. But this isn't a knee-jerk reaction. This isn't going to be a situation where I'm just pounding on the NFL just for the sake of it, because I have a lot of receipts. Let's just harken back to week 1, where the season opened up in Sao Paulo, ironically, with a Philadelphia Eagle team that is now on the top of the NFL's mountain as Super Bowl champs, as we saw there last night. And I'm going to get to the game a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy about it because I talked about it last night. So that's why I'm referring you to go check out the live stream on my YouTube channel. But when we talk about the game in Sao Paulo, which was on Peacock, I might add, where you're going to have games now, the international series, it's going to take place not only in Dublin, Ireland, where the Steelers are going to host a game there next year, but the year after that, where they're going to go to Australia, where you have all these games where the NFL is just trying to feed the mouths of CBS, Fox, ABC, ESPN, Peacock, Netflix, Amazon. It is just suffocating that they're just jamming the product down our throats. And I get it that content is king, and I get it that the NFL is the sport of all sports. But when is enough enough? So let's just put that all together on top of Black Friday, on top of games every day of the week except for Tuesday. Games on Christmas Day that just swallow up and spit out the NFL. Games on a weekend where the college football playoff is getting ready to start their first ever expanded playoff, where nope, we have to have 2 games on Saturday. Or the playoff games on a Monday night for a wild card, which the wild card round is an abomination. The only good game you got this year was Washington at Tampa, the Sunday night game. All the other games were atrocious. Do I need to even break them all down? Chargers and Houston, the Steeler game in Baltimore, which was a disaster. The Green Bay-Philadelphia game, which had zero flow to it. Buffalo blowing out Denver in the opener that first Sunday in wildcard weekend, and then the Monday night game with the Rams and Vikings. The Vikings had this phenomenal year, although it fell apart in Detroit, but it really imploded out at SoFi. A divisional round, which, all right, you had a decent Houston-Kansas City game, but nothing really to write home about. You got Detroit, which was probably the ultimate shocker of this postseason, losing to Washington, and good for the Commanders. They were a great story, and getting to a championship game against the Eagles, but how did that work out? They gave up 55 points in the process in an atrocious game. You did have Buffalo-Baltimore, which is a very good game, and you did have Buffalo-Kansas City, which was also a very good game. And then it leads up to last night. And this is why the NFL, no matter how many people could get at me, Jay Reels, you're off your rocker. You don't know what you're talking about. The sport is as strong and as big as it ever has and will be. I get all that. And they probably got 120 some odd million watching the game last night, maybe even more than last year. But guess what? One more time, the NFL got what it deserved for this calendar year. Because that game last night was a complete snooze fest. It was an atrocity. It was just as bad as you could possibly get. And I don't care if they got 400 billion watching the game. Because what else are you going to watch there on a Sunday night? You're going to watch Three's Company reruns? Rest in peace, John Ritter. You're going to watch Seinfeld. You're going to watch whatever other TV show that's on. There's nothing going up against the NFL. Maybe you watch the Puppy Bowl. That was probably more exciting than watching the game there last night. And I don't want to hear from Roger Goodell all the way on down where people are going to get at me to say the NFL was at its biggest stage and it delivered, so on and so forth. All right, you want to talk about the pomp and circumstance leading up to the coin toss and everything, the national anthems and this and that, whatever. It's all about the game. And I understand it's an event. I get that. I am not stupid or ignorant to think that when we get to Super Bowl Sunday, this unofficial Sunday, or holiday, I should say, and I know I've gone past 3 minutes, people. Here I am on my soapbox, but I promise I'll land it here. Where for all of what the Super Bowl brings, and we understand that there's going to be so many other different things that are going to lead up to the game, and then it's the game itself. But boy, the NFL cannot be happy. I don't care how many people watch the game. Because what you saw there last night was just domination by the Eagle defense. Kudos to them. And them exacting revenge 2 years ago against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs' bid for history came up flat as a pancake. That is the game in a nutshell. What more can I tell you? And thank goodness, and I'm going to say this, and I promise I'll talk a little bit about the game and a couple other things before I move on. Thank goodness that this season is over. This was one that will not be remembered in the record books when it comes to the 2024 season. Yes, they're going to remember that the Eagles won, and yes, they're going to remember that the Chiefs went for a three-peat, but that is it. The Chiefs, forget about the dynasty. I don't want to hear it. Yes, they've been to 5 Super Bowls in 6 years. They won 3 of them, and kudos. Congratulations. Great. But to me, in my eyes, they did not win 3 in a row. They did not win 4 in a row the way the Islanders did in the 80s. They did not win 5 in a row the way the Canadians did in the 50s. They did not win 8 in a row the way the Boston Celtics did in the 50s and into the 60s. And they're certainly not John Wooden's teams of UCLA in college basketball. So let's just put all that to rest. And I get it. You want to talk about Patrick Mahomes being the greatest of all time. He still has a whole half of his career to go. And when it's all said and done, he probably will be. But we got to pump the brakes on that today, considering what happened here last night. Because for a guy that is now 17-4 in the postseason and has had, going into last night's game, 1 bad half of football in the AFC Championship game against the Cincinnati Bengals, well, you know what? You could add this one to the game, to last night. Super Bowl 55, which was a carbon copy, him running for his life against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down in Tampa when they lost that Super Bowl, but that wasn't all on him. Last night, partially that is on him. So he had a bad game, and you could chalk it up for Philly, them being stout on defense and having a game plan and taking the three-peat personally. Good for them. They deserve to win the game by far. But enough. Thank God NFL's over. I am not going to shed a tear this coming Sunday when there's no football to be had or no football to be watched. Thank goodness. We have the draft in late April, and I understand we're going to have OTAs, and I get it that once you get past the All-Star game in baseball, everybody's going to be looking at training camps, so on and so forth. I can wait. as the game last night, what can I add to that? Really, what can I even think to even put forth when we look at the domination by the Eagles? I'm not even going to talk about the early personal fouls, the A.J. Brown, the offensive pass interference. He got one nudge on the quarterback Trent McDuffie's helmet, and then the second one, he didn't sell it. That was it. But they got the penalty back where McDuffie interfered with Dallas Goedert. So that was ticky-tack. I get it. But for whatever the reason, that obviously didn't factor in to the game itself. But for the Eagles, they were lucky. I will say this. They were certainly lucky to have a 10-0 lead become 17-0 with the pick six by Cooper DeJean, and then turn that around where Mahomes threw another terrible interception. Granted, he got bumped into, I understand. And then they punched it into the end zone because as I was watching this game, and even when it was 10-0, I said to myself, watch the Chiefs maybe even kick a field goal here, and they'll go into halftime and it'll be 10-3, and they're going to have the Eagles right where they want them. Where the Eagles dominated the first half, and Saquon Barkley didn't even go off. If anything, the Chiefs neutralized Barkley. That was the only thing good that they did throughout the course of the evening. And for that to then all of a sudden blow up in their faces, where Mahomes was looking like a rookie quarterback there, the Cooper DeJean pick six, which pretty much that's iced the game, 17-0. And then I understand the other interception, which really just put the final nail in the coffin for the Chiefs' hopes of getting a three-peat, 24-0. And just like the halftime show with Kendrick Lamar, turn the TV off, you could have done so right before you even watched Kendrick Lamar in his halftime performance. And that is the Super Bowl. I'm not going to add anything else to that as far as the game is concerned, because even though the final was 40-22, but those final couple of touchdowns were cosmetic, as you know. The game was 40-6 and 34-0 at one point. And that's it. That's all I got. And one more time, if you want more extensive analysis and breakdown and everything, please go to the YouTube channel and check out the live stream I had last night, because I talk about everything there. And that's all I'm going to discuss when it comes to this game last night. So I'm sorry, people. I know I'm on my high horse here, killing the NFL. And again, I know it's going to be an unpopular opinion. I get it that people are going to wave the pom-poms. And if you live outside of the Philadelphia area, the game was, please, one of the worst Super Bowls you could ever watch. And I'm not saying that because it is a fact. If you enjoyed watching that Super Bowl, whether you hosted people or watching it by yourself, man, that was a complete eyesore. And kudos to the Eagles. Give it up. Now, real quick, so just to talk about the two teams. For the Eagles, exacting revenge, Jalen Hurts, you heard it all before throughout the course of 2 years ago, that feeling that he had in his stomach, knowing that he had to get back there and win the game, and it just so happened to be against the team that beat him. So kudos to Jalen Hurts. He did have the bad interception there, which made you think, oh, could this turn the tide there for the Chiefs? Absolutely, that did not happen in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So for Hurts, congratulations to him. He's a game MVP. The defense, 6 sacks. What more can you say about them? At first, when I saw 34-0, I said to myself, can the Eagles actually pitch a shutout here? But of course, you'd never seen that happen in Super Bowl history, and I didn't think that was going to happen anyway. And in the ensuing drive, they actually scored a touchdown, so that made it moot. But the Eagles and their journey throughout all this, where losing the Super Bowl 2 years ago, 10-1 last year. We talked about how they bottomed out last year to end the season, where their wild card hopes in Tampa just went up in smoke. And then this year, they were 2-2. Obviously started off in Sao Paulo, like I said. And then they had the middle of the season, Nick Sirianni griping at the Philly faithful, on top of Brandon Graham coming out saying that A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts aren't on the same page. They're not best of buds. And then here they are, steamrolling through the rest of the regular season. All right, a little bit of a hiccup there in Washington, the next to last game of the year. Then that no-flow game against Green Bay, but they won, barely coming out alive against the Rams in the divisional round. We know what happened in the championship game, culminating in a Super Bowl victory last night. And what could you say? Just a tremendous turnaround after what happened 2 years ago, last year, and even in the middle of the year, for them to, and deservedly so, win a Super Bowl. Congratulations to them, the organization, fans, etc. Now, the other side of the coin, again, I don't want to hear about dynasty. I don't want to hear about greatest of all time with Mahomes. He's going to probably end up being that. He's not going to match Brady's 7 Super Bowls. I don't think that's going to happen. And even if he doesn't, he could still end up being the GOAT. Because this barometer that we have when it comes to championships, and granted that Brady has the most when it comes to an NFL player, but Mahomes still has his story written. He's been to 5 already, and with the way the team is constructed, as long as he's the quarterback and Andy Reid's the coach, I can see them going back for 2 or 3 more. I hope they don't. We're all sick of the Chiefs, understood. But they take a bit of a hit here last night because despite the fact that all the credit goes to the Eagles, their game plan defensively, Vic Fangio, remember, he was 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes throughout his career, and in the one game that it truly mattered, boy, he took him to the back of the woodshed. But for Mahomes, he takes a bit of a hit here, as I mentioned before, and granted, 17-4 in the postseason, that is astronomical. But last night was just one that does fall on his shoulders because of those 2 throws that just put the game to rest. And 2 throws that were certainly unlike anything that we've seen Patrick Mahomes in the postseason throughout his 7-year career. 8 years, I understand, but 7 years as a starter. So that does fall on him. And then Andy Reid, one more time, this was a carbon copy of watching Super Bowl 55 when Tampa just let the dogs loose. And I get it that their offensive line was Swiss cheese then. And to me, I feel like I was watching the same game last night. And Andy Reid, he's also going to take another hit. He's still going to be an all-time great. He's still going into the Hall of Fame in roller skates. But last night was one that, going for history, the team didn't show up. Now, I don't know if it was a lack of preparation. I don't know if it was a lack of adjustments because we've seen Andy Reid not really adjust well here at times. And last night was indicative of that. But I understand that was a juggernaut defensively. They were not going to be denied. But still, this does hit the resume and hit the legacy of Mahomes and Reid because even if they win another 2 Super Bowls, they're going to think back to this one and even the one. Tampa, maybe not so much because, again, their offensive line was so bad and Mahomes was running for his life just like he was last night, but he did throw those 2 interceptions, which were terrible. And that's why that also falls on Mahomes' shoulders. And that's what you have there with the 2 teams. There isn't anything else I'm going to say there. I'm going to just move on from there. Real quick, the commercials were what they were. They've been precipitously falling from years on end, dating back to the Bud Light days of What's Up and Cindy Crawford in front of the vending machine at the gas station with the Pepsi commercials. Those are a far cry from what we've seen today. The Nike commercial was great last night with the women's sports. That I give it up. And the other one with the flag football with the girls and Brad, I thought that was pretty comical. But other than that, the Seal commercial, I don't even know what the product was off the top of my head. That was an abomination. I mean, I can't erase that vision out of my head. And no offense to Seal, but the commercials were what they were. Still not any better than what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago and beyond. The halftime, listen, I know Kendrick Lamar's music. I like his early music than his music that's out now. I get it that he is all the rage in music at the present moment. Based on the Grammy Award winning song there, the Not Like Us, the diss song to Drake. I can't believe I'm even bringing this up, but the performance I thought was good. It was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. I would have liked him throwing some of his older stuff there, whether it be All Right, Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. I get it. He threw in Humble and DNA. He pretty much had a medley for that. A lot of it was going to be the more recent stuff, which, frankly, and listen, I go back to hip-hop from its day one. And I'm not even just talking about Sugar Hill Gang Rappers Delight. I'm talking about Don D, Futura 2000, Tracy 168, Crash, Rocksteady, New York City Breakers. Shall I continue? DJ Jazzy J, Grandmaster Flash, T-Connection, Funky 4, Furious 5. You break it all down. So it's not like I'm this guy that doesn't know anything about hip-hop. But Kendrick Lamar, I got to give him his props, no doubt. I'm not trying to say he's a guy that doesn't deserve the attention, the credit, etc. But to me, it does nothing for me. And his performance last night was good. Prince still has the heavyweight belt when it comes to Super Bowl halftimes. That's all I got to say about that. And that's not a knock. That's not a diss. I'm not saying that the performance was bad. I understand so many people killed it, but for their own political reasons, which is a joke. And please, I'm definitely not going to go there. I thought it was good. Okay? So I'm just going to leave it there if you missed the halftime or what have you. So there's that. And the broadcasting, as far as Brady and Burkhardt, listen, Brady came out with the statement that I got to give them a C for their performance there last night. How is Tom Brady? And I got nothing against him. I rooted against him all these years, especially with my Steeler teams, but I got nothing personal against the guy. And I like what he's done. He's added a couple of elements. Last night he redeemed himself with his comment about him losing Super Bowl 42 to the Giants in reference to Mahomes losing this game. But for him to come out and say that Jalen Hurts made a throw of his life at 27-0 to make it 34-0, you would think that they were down 27-21, and that was the last play of the game, a 45-yard bomb or however long the touchdown was, and the throw of his life? What? And for Kevin Burkhardt, and I get it, this is broadcasters speak. They want to try to reel the viewing audience in by saying, well, hey, there are only 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions from coming back in the game when we already know that the game is over. So, Kevin Burkhardt, you're not fooling anybody. You may be fooling the casual fan, or you may be fooling the novice sports fan, football fan, but please, that game was over at halftime. But I understand, they cannot punt the game. They have to try to keep the eyeballs to the sets. But as I said earlier, where else are you going to go to watch TV? You're going to watch reruns of The Honeymooners? You're going to watch something that's on any of the other networks? I mean, give me a break. You're not watching The Big Bang Theory when it's 9:30 at night when you have 100 people over and you're eating wings and drinking beer when you know that the only thing that's on is the game. So please, I'm just so fed up. And can I just put a lid on the NFL right then and there? I know I got to get to Aaron Rodgers just next, which is another atrocity if you ask me. And again, I told you people, I'm going to be on my soapbox. So now after that diatribe, okay, let me now scale it back a little bit. But I got to get on this thing with Aaron Rodgers yesterday, the story that was released, that it's unlikely that he's going to come back to quarterback the Jets next year. And he does have one more year left, $37.5 million, which is non-guaranteed. And we still don't know what he's going to do. Now, these were sources that came out yesterday, and I get it. They want to break these stories, so on and so forth. But I'm sure Roger Goodell and company were not happy to hear that on the game and pretty much the country's biggest sport on its biggest day, you had to hear news about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you can't make it up. So Rodgers, we still don't know what he's going to do, whether or not he's going to go off into the sunset and retire, or if he's going to come back next year. And we know that the Jets are going to take severe cap hits, even though there's non-guaranteed money. And I don't have it in front of me because to me, to break that down right now, it's just not even worth it. But we don't know if he's coming back next year as far as him personally, whether that means he signs on with another team or organization, or if he just calls it quits. But it looks like the Jets are going to say, we're going to start over, which, you know what, they have a right. Now, I know that may be to the chagrin of the Jet fan because they want to be competitive. They feel like maybe with Rodgers back and with a new coaching and GM regime, maybe they could somehow, some way get to 9, maybe 10 wins and be in the thick of things come December into January. But right now, if they're going to bring in, let's say, a Kirk Cousins, if he gets cut, or who knows who they're going to draft if they move up in the draft to get either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, which is not a lock by any stretch, then you know what? Kudos to them. But for Aaron Rodgers, I don't want to hear about Aaron Rodgers. Until he decides whether he's coming back, that's a story. If the Jets have confirmed that, all right, fine. But could they wait till today to do that, the day after the Super Bowl? I'm just so fed up. So that's number one. Speaking of coaching hires, it looks like Kellen Moore is going to get the job at New Orleans. And unlike what we saw there with Ben Johnson and even to a certain extent Aaron Glenn, I get it, he's coming to the Jets where we all know, drafted by the Jets, the connection there that Glenn has with the team that he grew up with. But for Kellen Moore to come off of this performance, and congratulations to him if he's going to get the job. Now, that was the rumor, him getting the Saints job, but good luck. You got to get a quarterback, and I don't know if he's a leader of men. Yes, he looks great right now and certainly looks bad in the eyes of Cowboy fans because remember, they cut Kellen Moore a couple of years ago. He went to the Chargers for 1 year, then went to Philadelphia, and now he's a Super Bowl winner, and he's going to be at the helm of a head coaching team where, as we all know, Jerry fumbled that to where now he has Brian Schottenheimer as his guy. So, not to pile on to the Cowboy fan, but I'm sure they got to be disgusted knowing that Moore was their guy and could have been their coach, and here he is now going to be in New Orleans. How long he lasts, that remains to be seen. Now you have Deebo Samuel. He's requesting a trade where the Niners are going to grant him that, so let's see where he goes. All right, fine, we'll deal with that as we get to March when they open up the season again when it comes to free agency, and I'm sure that maybe a trade before then. As far as the MVP, Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson, not surprised. I know there's some people on there griping, how did Allen deserve it, so on and so forth. Here's what it boils down to, people. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it one last time. I promise, in 15 seconds or less. You take Josh Allen off of Buffalo, and you take Lamar Jackson off of Baltimore. And guess what? For this year, Josh Allen's more valuable because with the Ravens, you still have Derrick Henry, you still have Mark Andrews, you still have Rashad Bateman, not that I'm a big fan. You still have Zay Flowers. Who do the Bills have? Dawson Knox, good player. Dalton Kincaid, good player. Keon Coleman, a rookie. Amari Toomer, you hear me? Amari Cooper, they barely used him. Think of the old Giant. James Cook, running back, very good. That's why Allen is your MVP, despite the fact that the numbers are bigger on Jackson's part, so that's it. I'm going to back away from that. Randy Moss making an emotional return. Good for him. We all understand what he had to go through there. I believe he had colon cancer. I may be wrong on that. But just to see him on the set there, I didn't watch. I just saw the highlight clip, him getting all tearful with the messages that were sent by his peers, former players, etc. That was a great scene. And Randy, listen, straight cash, homie. So good to see him back. And hopefully he is at 100% when it comes to his clean bill of health. So kudos and congrats to him. And then there's some sad news. You had two passings with Dick Jauron, the former Chicago Bear and Buffalo Bill coach, dying of cancer, 74 years of age. That came as a surprise. Jauron with those two stints there in both of those places. Didn't really last there or really make a mark, but still was part of the NFL coaching pedigree and fraternity. So he transitions at 74. And speaking of the Bears, Virginia McCaskey, a part owner after Papa Halas died and became, I should say, not even part owner, became the chairwoman of the team, also passed away at 102. She inherited it from her father back in 83 when he passed away. And to get to 102, listen, we can all sign up for that in blood, I might add. But for Virginia McCaskey, thoughts, prayers, and condolences not only go out to the McCaskey family, to the Bears, to the Jauron family, the NFL, etc., as some sad news had come about there over the course of the weekend. And then lastly, with the Hall of Fame, you had Antonio Gates, Eric Allen, Jared Allen, no relation, and Sterling Sharp, the smallest class since the 2005 class, led by Dan Marino and Steve Young, which I believe they also had 4 players go in. So no Eli Manning and no Adam Vinatieri, which I was surprised. I understand he's a place kicker, but the guy had some of the biggest clutch kicks in the history of the sport and won 4 Super Bowls, and I'm sure he had quite a few All-Pros in the process. So I'm a little bit surprised why he didn't get the nod from the football writers. But for Gates, to me, he was a lock Hall of Famer. I understand maybe not first ballot, but for a tight end, the guy was phenomenal. Played on those teams with Phillip Rivers and LaDainian and Tomlinson. I get he didn't win a thing, but he was definitely a dominant tight end when he played there in the 2000s into the 20-teens. Eric Allen, who was a cornerback, mostly for Philadelphia Eagles, also played with the Saints, had 1 first-team All-Pro and 2 second-team All-Pros, but in an era where he played, when you had Deion Sanders, Rod Woodson, Darrell Green, among others, he was a guy that was good. Very good. But was he great? Was he Hall of Fame worthy? I think not. And he did have 54 interceptions, which is a lot throughout the course of a career. But was he great? Sorry, he was not. Aeneas Williams, he's another one. Also in that era. And Aeneas Williams is borderline too, but still. Jared Allen was a 4-time All-Pro, first team, and had a ton of sacks, dominant, played for Kansas City as well as the Vikings. And Sterling Sharp, I know his career was cut short by injury, but also had several first-team All-Pros, led in receptions, led in yards, was a very good, he was a great wide receiver. And because of the back, similar to a career like Terrell Davis, who was dominant for a short period of time and then made it into the Hall after all these years, for Sterling Sharp, he's deserving of that award. So I have no qualms, ifs, ands, buts about him getting enshrined in Canton. So congratulations to him. And as far as Eli, I'm not shocked. For him to have the 2 Super Bowl runs, as we all know well and good, but is he a Hall of Fame first ballot lock? He is not. He's going to get in one day, but obviously this was not the year for him. So thankfully, can I now exhale and say goodbye to the NFL? Well, guess what? Now I got to get into the NBA as I lace up my high tops, and I also talk some college basketball, tie that in. So all I have to say is this, and for the Dallas Maverick fan that's out there, I know you're hurt, I know you're puzzled, and I'm sure you're still infuriated 9 days after the organization traded Luka Doncic to, of all teams, the Los Angeles Lakers. And in the process, you get back Anthony Davis, and we know 10-time All-Star, former champ, etc. He's going to go into the Hall of Fame one day in his own right. But Saturday, he made his debut in a Maverick uniform at home against the Houston Rockets. And to break down the great, the good, the bad, and the ugly in one game is indicative of what could lie ahead for Anthony Davis over the next few years in Dallas. And if it doesn't come with a championship, this trade is going to end up being one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA. Now, let me break down the good, great. And I got to go good, great. I said great, good to try to go in that order. Here's the good. He came back in the lineup at home to kind of show the fans that, hey, it's going to be all right. I understand I'm not Luka Doncic. I understand I'm not 25 years of age, but I'm going to put an impact on the game, being a guy that is going to play as a rim protector, low post. Yes, I got my three-point shooting ability, my offensive game. Obviously, defensively, I'm going to shut it down and lock it down with the best of them. No doubt. So now he's in the lineup. I'm sure that kind of eased the tension there going into the arena where you had thousands or a bit over 1,000 protesting outside of the arena to the front office, the GM in particular, even the ownership. And the owner came out with some comments, which I'll get to. But for him to be in the lineup that day was good. The great 26 points, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 blocks. You can't ask for a better debut from a guy that a lot of the pressure and a lot of the focus because of this trade is going to be squarely on his shoulders. So guess what? He delivered in his first game offensively, even defensively, as a member of the Mavericks. Now to the bad. He had to leave in the third quarter with what looked like a lower body injury. And when you watch the replay, you kind of wonder, did Alperen Sengun look like he bumped into him based on the initial watch or the initial clip? But when you see him go right past Davis, as Davis looks like he's about to defend Sengun from going to the basket, came up lame, looked like it could have been a groin issue, and I'm saying that nicely, but he goes down, and then the next thing you know, he's out of the game. The post game seemed like it was fine. He said he tweaked something. I'll be fine. I'll be okay. Raring to go. Now to the ugly. He's going to be out for several weeks, maybe a month, with this injury. And the injury right now, not the ab strain that he suffered almost 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia as a member of the Lakers, which a lot of people feared that's what it was. He has an adductor strain, which is right on the inside of the leg. He's going to be out maybe a month. You know the Maverick fan right now, it is in uproar. They are outraged. This is their worst nightmare. And even if he comes back, let's say a month from now, and is healthy and maybe takes them on a playoff run, but they already know that the shoe is going to drop at some point when that other shoe drops, as it did all in the same day. This is going to be a problem. And Nico Harrison, I know he is sweating like, I was going to say something nasty. He is, let's put it this way, his ass is on the line. And there's no shock. There's no surprise. That's not to say he's going to get fired this year at the end of the season or what have you, because ownership signed off on this. And I don't want to hear ownership now coming out, and this isn't Mark Cuban, people. As you know, he does have a minority stake in the franchise, but as we all know, he sold a big part of that to the likes of the new owner, and I'm pulling up the article because I want to get quotes, Patrick Dumont, acknowledging the fans' frustrations from the trade, et cetera, and trying to be the good guy. And I quote, I clearly understand that. I really appreciate that. I'm a big Luka fan as well. My family are big Luka fans. I have really a deep appreciation for what he brought to this team, what he brought to Dallas, and the excitement he brings. He's an electrifying player. And I want you to know that I really sympathize with all our fans who feel hurt. As far as I'm concerned, Luka's a Mav for life. Seriously? And I really wish him nothing but happiness in his success in his career as he continues in LA. But then later on he says, in my mind, the way teams win is by focus, by having the right character, by having the right culture, the right dedication to work as hard as possible to create a championship winning outcome. And if you're not doing that, you're going to lose. But he stopped short of saying that the Mav culture and that when it was brought up to him about Doncic, did he fit into that? He said, no, that wasn't the case. It's about the focus of the team. Come on, read between the lines, people. I get he's a big Luka fan, and I'm sure it probably hurt him to the core to trade him. But he did. And I don't want to hear whatever rigmarole that he's going to have to try to damage control this trade because it is unjustified. If you traded Luka Doncic for Victor Wembanyama, if you traded Luka Doncic for Jason Tatum, if you traded Luka Doncic for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if you traded Luka Doncic for Anthony Edwards, maybe I would say, you know what, I can understand that trade. But for a guy who I understand big men do not grow on trees, and a guy who defends, and Luka is not going to be compared by any stretch to John Havlicek. Look him up. Defensively, I might add. But this is a trade that the ownership, that Nico Harrison, and maybe the coach, they're going to be out on the rail. They will rue the day. And if Luka goes to LA, and he's already in LA, if Luka's in LA and he wins not one, not two, dare I even say 3 championships, the owner is going to face the heat as long as he's alive on God's green earth. And that is it. I can't add anything more to that. So there you go. As far as other trades, Jimmy Butler, we talked about that, debuted with the Warriors against the Bulls, ironically, a team that, of course, he played for many years ago, and he felt happy to be wanted again. That was his quote. Now, let's face it, part of it was his doing, based on the comments he said last spring when he was hurt with the knee injury, and here he is at Formula One events or whatever it was there by Hard Rock Stadium saying that if I was playing against the Celtics, we would have beaten them, and don't even say the Knicks, because if I was playing, we definitely would have beaten the Knicks. My guy, you're not even in uniform. How could you even dare with the hubris and bravado to even come out and say those things? I get it, you're full of confidence. I get it that if you were suited up and playing, that you had a better shot for the Heat to beat those teams, but you weren't playing. And Pat Riley, you knew that was probably the beginning of the end. There's no way I can re-sign this guy. He wants 2 years at $110 million, whatever it is. So partly that is on Butler, so I'm not going to take what he says to heart. You got to take that with a grain of salt. But a great game, 25 points in his debut. They play the Bucks tonight without Giannis. Giannis has that calf injury that is cropping up against him dating back to last year. Remember, he missed the last part of the regular season and did not play in that opening round series against Indiana. If you recall, against the Celtics, he had that calf injury popped up, and a lot of people thought, ooh, could have been an Achilles. That wasn't the case, so now you're not going to see him throughout the course of this early part of the week through the All-Star break, so you're not going to see him in the All-Star game. I believe Trae Young has been now inserted into the lineup in the absence of Antetokounmpo, so that's what you have there. And then you have Joel Embiid. Shocker, he might need surgery on that left knee. Him coming back to be a part of the Olympic team and not getting himself on track. I mean, it's a mess in Philly, as we all know. And Embiid, he's not going to be the same player. He'll have his moments. He'll have his big performances in big games. But can you count on 2 rounds, let alone 1 round, if they make it into the postseason, for him to be upright, to be anything close to his former MVP self? I think not. Hubie Brown, his final broadcast yesterday. We know the one-time coach of the ABA, NBA with the Knicks and the Hawks, and then an announcer for all these years. The final one yesterday in that Philly-Milwaukee game. And Hubie Brown, he is a treasure. There's nothing else to add. 91 years of age, suffering through tragedy here of recent ilk with his kids and even with his wife. And he is still taking with faith and just with humility. Congratulations, Mr. Brown. Thank you for so much that you contributed to the league, and all the best to you on your next chapter. 91. Here I am talking about Virginia McCaskey at 102. Please, give me 91. I'd sign up for that. Where? Where can I go to do that? So kudos to him. Then you have Chet Holmgren back after 3 months being out with that pelvic fracture. A little bit of a contribution, minutes restriction there a couple nights ago, but that is a welcome addition there to an Oklahoma City team that is looking to do big things, as we know, number 1 in the West, and they're going to go with the West and home court throughout the conference going away, as we know. So good to see him back. And then how about that trade there with the Lakers bringing a big man, knowing that they had to let go of Anthony Davis to bring back Luka. They go to Charlotte to bring Mark Williams, a guy who was averaging 16 and 9 this year. And what happens? He failed his physical. And it wasn't even a back issue that he'd been nursing. There were other issues about his physical that were alarming and therefore had to nullify the trade. So now the Lakers are going to be scrambling to see if they can get a guy off the scrap heap. And speaking of which, Ben Simmons, where the Nets bought him out, and he's going to sign with LA. No, not with the Lakers, but with the Clippers. So he's going to team up again to see whether or not he's going to have anything left in the tank. And ironically, with James Harden, the guy who was traded for from Brooklyn to Houston in that deal, if you recall. Oh, wait, I may have this all mixed up here. Harden, he went to, no, from Philadelphia before he left Houston to go to Brooklyn, and then from Brooklyn to Philly in that exchange. So I got my trades all mixed up. So now he's going to team up with Harden as well as Ben Simmons to see whatever he has left, more so as a defensive guy than a guy who's going to be a distributor and a facilitator there in that Clipper offense. So you have that. And then, like I said, the Lakers are going to be without a big man unless somebody's going to be off the scrap heap here over the course of the coming weeks, because as we all know, the trade deadline is come and gone. So how they handle that, we'll see what will take place there. And then lastly, in another issue of players or former players on the rebound, as I mentioned with Randy Moss, Nate Robinson finding that kidney donor as he needed a kidney transplant, and that was a very sobering story regarding his health, even dating back to his playing days and needing a kidney in the worst way, dialysis. He's a young guy. And for him to have to go through that, but he found the match and was able to get that taken care of here over the last few days. So congratulations to him, and even to the guy, give him credit for giving up his kidney to save Robinson's life. And of course, Robinson, post-NBA career, had that deal. Was it, I believe, that fight with Jake Paul, where a lot of people were concerned about him, etc. So good to see him get back on his feet. So I had to throw out some bouquets toward Nate Robinson. But as far as the NBA now, with the NFL out for another 5-6 months or so, NBA over the course of the weekend, now I'm going to transition to the Knicks because I kind of saved that. I know I started off with the scenario regarding Anthony Davis, but as far as the Knicks go, I'm sure the fans may not be overly concerned, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to be concerned to sell me, because from what I watched here, not what took place that Saturday night against the Celtics, but the week before against the Lakers, 0-2 against Oklahoma City. They already lost to the Cavaliers against teams that are above 500. They have not played well. And as evidence of what we saw at the Garden the other night, despite the fact that they cut the deficit to 3, but the Celtics were in cruise control throughout when they ended up winning 131-104. And for Karl Anthony Towns, all right, it's February. Nobody's going to care, or it's going to get swept under the rug. 9 points, 9 rebounds in a nationally televised game. I promise you, if that was a playoff game in April, May, and dare I even say June in the finals, he would have been roasted. Because that's what this trade is going to bank on. And check those receipts when I talked about it there in late September heading into October. Karl Anthony Towns is going to be measured on what he does in the playoffs, not what he does throughout the course of the regular season. And yes, he's having a very good season. And congratulations, the transition seems to be fine. And we know he's a local kid. He's from Jersey, about an hour out from New York City. And I don't think this would faze him in the least. But guess what? If he was not criticized the other night by that performance against a team that is ahead of them in the standings and a team that they're striving to be anything close to as far as a champion goes, but if you're going to have Karl Anthony Towns, and I don't want to put it squarely on him, but because he had such a putrid output as far as offensively, if that happens in the spring, forget about it. He ain't seen nothing yet. So just keep that in mind as we move it along. But I'd be concerned if I'm a Knicks fan. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear, oh, it's middle of February. Oh, we'll be there come playoff time, this and that. What, for another second round exit? As it is, you're a 3 seed. You're going to be matched up against the Celtics in the conference semis. And I understand anything can happen and injuries can play out. We don't know how this is going to shape up. But in the 2 games against the Celtics this year, Opening night, you got your doors blown off, and then 2 nights ago was a carbon copy of that. So how am I supposed to feel if I was a Knicks fan, and thank God I'm not, to think that, wait, can we even play on the same court as the Celtics? That would be the question that would be floating in my head if I'm a Knicks fan today. So let's marinate over that as we move on with the season. But as far as what's happening else in the sport, I know out west, the Nuggets are starting to make a bit of a surge here as they're now in 3rd place. They've now gone past the Rockets, who have played a little bit better, but still have had to endure a 3-game losing streak, including losing to the Knicks and Nets early last week. But for Denver, now with winners of 6 in a row, and let's see if they can get to that 2 seed, which would be important for the Nuggets, only because at least they would be able to host 2 playoff series in their building before going to a conference final. I understand how did that work out for them last year when they were at home against the Minnesota Timberwolves, especially when they had let me make sure I got this correct. Yeah, they had a lead in their series where they ended up going home and they blew a Game 7 in their building where they, I believe, had a 20-point lead at one point before losing that game. Now, we get it. Home court may not mean as much as it once did many years ago, but you would still like to have it if anything else, but for you to know that Oklahoma City's in front, and if you had that scenario where you were able to host at least the first 2 rounds, you're going to take it. And now come to think of it, Denver was down 0-2 in their series. They lost the first 2 games at home before winning the next 3, including Game 5 in their building. They got blown out in Game 6 in Minnesota, and then they lost a Game 7 in their building. So I get it. There's no guarantees to home court, but you still like to have it, especially come playoff time. But they played well. The Lakers have played well. As you know, they've won 5 in a row, but they're only in 5th place there in the West. And T-Wolves have played a little bit better. Now they're in the 1 through 6 range. They're currently 6th, followed by Clippers, Mavericks, Kings, and Suns. The East is a different beast. Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, Chicago. Those teams, I don't know. They're going to be jockeying for that play-in scenario where you have the Pistons. Now they actually are in the 6th seed in the East. So kudos to them and what they've done here, especially after last year and that debacle of a season with all those games that they lost, setting the record there in NBA history. So there you have it with the NBA. As far as the schedule this week, it's a light schedule because you're going to have the All-Star game, and let's see how that's going to play out. I will talk about more of that on Thursday with the new format. But as far as the schedule here, tonight, Minnesota at Cleveland's a good game. Atlanta, Orlando. Boston at Miami, for nostalgic sake, I guess. Warriors at Bucks. We talked about Jimmy Butler in his first game. Now they're going to go up the, whatever that interstate is, from Chicago or from Illinois to Wisconsin. Then you have Sacramento at Dallas. Tomorrow, Knicks at Indiana. Detroit at Chicago, for what that's worth. Memphis at Phoenix, not a bad game. And then Wednesday, you have San Antonio at Boston. Atlanta, New York, Trae Young in the Garden again. Detroit at Chicago, so they're playing back-to-back, huh? Yeah, back-to-back games in the Windy City for the Pistons. Phoenix at Houston. Miami at OKC. Milwaukee, Minnesota. So you got a few games to chew on here over the course of the next 3 days, including today. And then Thursday will be the final game before, or final slate of games before the All-Star break. And that's what you have there in the association. As far as the college game goes, right now you have to look at St. John's. This is a team with Rick Pitino being brought in last year and them just getting their feet wet and trying to get some traction going into this year. And boy, has the rubber hit the road here in 2024, 2025, because this, I won't go as far as saying that is it reminiscent of the 84, 85 St. John's Redmen at the time. Now, of course, they're the Red Storm under Lou Carnesecca. Now, mind you, they had much better players back then when you had a guy like Chris Mullin, who is a first-team All-American. Walter Berry. Was Mark Jackson on that team? I believe he was on that team as well. And, of course, you had a bunch of role players, but you had those 3 guys, Bill Wennington, the likes of him, winning those championships with the Bulls. He was a role player at best. But you had that team become #1 that year. They made it to a Final Four before losing to Georgetown. Could the same trajectory happen here for a Red Storm team that are playing over their heads. They beat Marquette earlier this week. This was after them beating Providence, to where the head coach, Rick Pitino, blasted his team for their performance, even in a win. But they made up for that against Marquette, as I briefly touched on in Thursday's podcast. And then they beat UConn there, where they came from behind at Stores on the road to beat the two-time defending national champions, to where they've now won 10 straight. Their longest winning streak since that 84-85 season when they won 14. And I have to say, I haven't watched every St. John's game. I'm going to hand raise high in the air, and I'm not paying attention to them every step of the way, despite the fact that they play on the other side of the bridge there in St. Albans, Queens, over right there by Union Turnpike. But we know the pedigree of Rick Pitino. Love him or hate him, stuff that's happened at Louisville and among other situations that have gone on in his life, but it's nothing personal with him. It's about what he's done on the court. He has been masterful. He has pushed all the right buttons, led by their player, R.J. Lewis Jr., and I would think that this team, now there's still plenty of basketball to be played. I'm not going to pencil them in as a Final Four team as of yet. Let's see where they fall once the bracket comes out. But St. John's, they're going to be a tough out here. There's no way to slice it. They've played well here, just on those few games that I documented, beating Marquette, who were ranked 11th at the time. UConn were 25th. They moved up to 19th before St. John's beat them there a couple of days ago. And now here they are. And I know you're going to have the rankings come out a little bit later, where they were 15th. They're probably going to shoot up to maybe as close to 10, and maybe even crack the top 10 when it's all said and done, because you also had Florida beat Auburn the other day, or really yesterday, or was it Saturday, I believe? Auburn, the number one team in the country, where Florida on the road beats them. So I would think you're going to see some maneuverability with the rankings here over the course of this day, where it'll be announced later on today. And give it up for St. John's. They have done more than what I could ever imagine, even under year two with Pitino at the helm. But I'm sure he is going to look at the big picture. He's going to think that this team may have a deep run in them. And we all know about his teams, whether they were loaded teams at Kentucky, winning a championship in 96, or having that, not going to say little engine that could, but having a Louisville team that a lot of people thought they could get to a Final Four and win. But what did they do? They actually did that, beating Michigan there in 2013. Who knows if St. John's is going to have that same scenario with a type of team that's built like Louisville. And you know, with him, it's all going to be about the front court press and defense, etc. I would think they're going to be more that type of team than the Kentucky Wildcat team that just had NBA players abound, from Antoine Walker to Walter McCarty to Derek Anderson to Ron Mercer. You can go on down the list. Tony Delk. So we can bandy about all the different scenarios, but right now, at this present moment, St. John's looks like a team to be reckoned with here. So, and I hate St. John's for all my fiber, dating back to those days in the 80s as a Georgetown Hoya fan, and they swept the Hoyas, as we know. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. But I got to give it up. St. John's looks like they're back, and maybe in a big way. But we'll have to see, because the buzz here in New York, you haven't gotten a lot of buzz for them. But now I'll get a better sense, because the football season's been long over with the Jets and Giants. And I don't know if there are a lot of believers in St. John's. Maybe more of the pulse is on the Knicks at the present moment. But you know I'm on top of it as we move it along here with the college basketball. Now that we get a little bit more deeper in the weeds with the NFL exiting stage right. All right, now let me lace up the skates again, put on the gloves, and take a trip around the National Hockey League, which there really isn't much to talk about. Now, there is going to be a pause here for the NHL, because they have tweaked this all-star format. And I haven't really followed the all-star format in years past. I know they do like the World versus USA versus this versus that, North America versus whatever, how they broke it down to kind of make it fresh and interesting, and even try to mix it up with the East and the West and with the divisions, and trying to add a couple of different wrinkles to make it that much more appealing. But I haven't gravitated to these all-star games by any stretch, and that goes through all sports. But now they're going to take this respite starting Wednesday, I believe, where you're going to have this four nations face-off. Canada, Sweden, Finland, and the U.S. And before you say, wait a minute, what about Russia? Now, I don't know if it's because of the current climate that Russia's not a part of this, to make it, I guess, a Final Five or a Five Nations face-off, and I understand that may be different or difficult because you have that odd number where you have the even number with the 4 different squads. But be that as it may, I don't know if that's the case. I could assume that is the reason why they're not a part of this. We all know that there are a ton of Russian players in the sport, and they would be deserving to be a part of this Nations face-off. But for whatever that is, I'm not going to discuss it because I'm not too familiar with it. So I'll leave it right there. But with that being said, I cannot get myself wrapped up into this Nations Final Four nonsense because, and this is going to take place starting Wednesday until the following Saturday, I believe. I think it's going from the 12th to the 20th. Or maybe that's, let me see, make sure I get my dates correct. No, it's the following Thursday. For some reason I had the 22nd in my head, but it's the 20th when I got to my senses. So my apologies on that, people. So they will drop the puck there on Wednesday. And the first game, as I pull up the schedule here, the first game you have here is, I think, Sweden versus Canada, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, no, it opens up Thursday, Finland, in Montreal, USA. Why is this all over the map here? So Team USA is going to play against Finland, and I believe it's Sweden, Canada on Wednesday. So they're going to break this up in all these different days. So I did get that right at least. So then you're going to have this round robin tournament that's going to bleed into next week. And then the championship game will be a week from this coming Thursday. So the 20th, they're going to have whatever pomp and circumstance. I guess the game is in Montreal. I don't know. But I could care less. I'm sorry, people. I'm not going to get wrapped up in it unless something crazy happens. But even then, it's not as if I'm going to turn on my set Wednesday night, even during a slow sports dead zone period that we're already ushered into. But I'm just going to leave it right there as far as discussing that. But you did have Alexander Ovechkin score another goal, now 16 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. And I even talked about this on my YouTube channel. Is he going to get the press? Is he going to get the attention that he deserves once he gets to 15, once he gets to 10, once he gets to single digits? And of course, when he has a handful of goals to break Wayne Gretzky. I understand he's not a USA-born player. He's not even a Canadian-born player. He is of Russian background and is the good sports fan, even just a good sports fan, are they going to wrap their arms around this record where we thought would never be broken? I think he has to get his just due and get bouquets thrown at him. I understand the hockey media may gravitate a little bit toward it. The sports landscape, you think the first takes of the world, they're going to discuss this? Absolutely not. They could care less. And mind you, ESPN, they're a partner with the NHL, and you would think that they would, and I'm sure they're probably going to highlight it at some point, but what, they're going to give it 30 seconds at best? Well, you know me, that's why you come to me to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in sports, because I'm going to discuss this and unpack it and share it with you guys and gals. So that's what we have there with Ovechkin, but now there's the pause. You're not going to see a regular season game for now 2 weeks because I believe the season does start up that Saturday, the 22nd. That's why I had the 22nd on the brain. So the NHL will pause, go on a hiatus for this Four Nations face-off, and wake me up on the 22nd when the season resumes. So no scheduled games there. I could move on from the NHL and now get in the batter's box briefly, because pitchers and catchers will report by the end of the week, where position players will report either a week from today or a week from tomorrow. Now, granted, there's still a ways to go before we get to the start of the baseball season, although it's in late March still. But as much as we could welcome in pitchers and catchers, as much as we could just have this thought of green grass and the lines being drawn up there on the first and third base lines, the sound, the crack of the bat, the catcher's mitt, or the pop of the mitt from the pitchers there as they get ready to ramp themselves up for a long marathon of a regular season. Yes, we could say hope springs eternal. Yes, we could exhale and say, I can't wait for baseball. But there's still plenty of time. There's still a ways to go, but at least it'll be a part of our consciousness to know that once everybody reports and all the questions that will be asked and a lot of the hope in all 30 ball clubs, even the ones that will be out of the pennant race by Memorial Day. But at least for 5 weeks or so, we could certainly exhale and welcome in warm thoughts of spring, of cold beer for those who eat hot dogs or the Italian sausage at a ball game. At least we could have those visions dancing in our heads leading up until the latter part of March once the baseball season begins. And yes, I'm hopeful. I am certainly thankful to be here to share my thoughts, etc. when it comes to that, and looking forward to a baseball season. But as much as I can lay out the red carpet, knowing that pitchers and catchers, the week has come to where they're going to report. But any games of note, any games that are going to count, we're still going to have to wait until we get to that point, the latter part of next month. And as I'm sure myself and a lot of other people will rejoice when the umpire says play ball, that means spring has arrived. That means the Sports Dead Zone Part 1 will be kaput, and we can look forward to a very interesting spring with all the other sports meshed in with baseball to talk about anything and everything that is happening in the sports world. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. I'm just trying to make sure I said everything. Yes, I did. As I put a lid on this podcast, thank you so much for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, the YouTube channel at JReels. Please go subscribe. Do it right now or right when you listen to the end of this. So you can even actually, flip up your screen. You can leave it in the background and you can hear me. So if you could do that, I greatly appreciate it. Independent podcasting and content creating at its finest, full-time people, as you know, trying to carve a path and blaze a trail in this business to earn an income doing what it is that I love, talking about what is happening in the world of sports. And if you haven't done so, with the subscribing, or if you have a question, comment, suggestion, hit me up on any of my socials, YouTube at JReels, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just the number, or the old-fashioned way, the JReels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It is in the blood. It is in the DNA. Since birth, since I've been alive and kicking on this planet. And if you didn't know, March 1st, 7th anniversary of the podcast. It's going to be a big one. Working on a guest list right now. Working on the length of the podcast. I know I teased it and really touched on it last Monday, but stay tuned to my socials, to my YouTube channel, etc. Because as long as I'm alive and breathing, as long as I have every fiber in my being talking about, one more time, what it is that my purpose, my passion, the fire that's in my belly to do what it is that I admire, that I love, that I've been doing it now almost 7 years and beyond. Whether it's internet radio, whether it's AM radio, whether it's at a community center in their local radio station, which was sent out maybe in a 10-block radius. I will always be here to provide nothing but entertaining, passionate, unadulterated, opinionated, very highly opinionated, and certainly unapologetic sports talk with passion, fire, fury, energy, thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JReels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. And I know Dracus Duplessis beat Sean Strickland the other day, dominated him, and won his bout there UFC the other day, so I just wanted to throw that in the mix. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JReels Podcast, on the flip, baby.